The ballroom shimmered under the soft glow of chandeliers, each crystal refracting light across the vast hall, creating an ambiance of elegance and grandeur. The evening was alive with the hum of refined conversation, laughter weaving through the clinking of delicate champagne flutes. The annual charity gala was one of the most anticipated events of the year, a gathering of business elites, media personalities, and political figures, all converging in a display of wealth, influence, and goodwill. At a table toward the back, seated deliberately away from the center of attention, was Barron Trump. Tall and composed, he occupied his seat with an air of quiet detachment, his piercing blue eyes scanning the room with the keen observation of someone who had grown up learning the power of presence. He had not come seeking attention, nor did he need it. His name alone was enough to make people glance in his direction, whispering in hushed voices behind manicured hands. Unlike the many guests who thrived under the spotlight, Barron seemed content to observe. He had been invited as a guest of a family friend, an opportunity to network, to engage with a different circle outside the political whirlwind that had shaped much of his life. Yet, as he sat there, calmly surveying the sea of tuxedos and glittering gowns, he remained acutely aware of the weight his name carried in rooms like these. The gala carried on in seamless perfection. Servers glided effortlessly between tables, their trays laden with decadent hors d'oeuvres and bubbling champagne. The atmosphere was light, convivial, a celebration of philanthropy and prestige. Yet beneath the surface there was always an undercurrent of power, of unspoken alliances and rivalries. And tonight, that undercurrent would soon shift, drawing everyone's attention toward a single unexpected moment. The evening's keynote speaker had been announced well in advance, a celebrated journalist known for their sharp wit and unapologetic critique of political figures. The mere mention of their name evoked polarized reactions. To some, they were a beacon of truth, to others a provocateur, reveling in controversy. As the MC took the stage, a hushed anticipation settled over the room. "Ladies and gentlemen," their voice rang out clear and practiced, "it is my great pleasure to introduce tonight's esteemed guest, a voice that has challenged, provoked, and inspired us, our keynote speaker." A wave of polite applause followed, though beneath it lay a collective curiosity. What would they say tonight? Would this be a speech of inspiration, or would it carry the sharp edge that had made them infamous? From a side entrance, the journalist strode confidently to the stage, dressed in an impeccable black suit, every step calculated, every movement dripping with charisma. They commanded the room with an ease that only came from years of public speaking. The applause softened as they adjusted the microphone, their smile widening as they surveyed the expectant crowd. "Good evening, everyone," they began, their voice warm yet laced with something unreadable. It's always a privilege to stand before a crowd like this. So many powerful, brilliant minds gathered for a noble cause. But let's be honest, we're also here for the speeches, the connections, and maybe, just maybe, the scandals. A ripple of laughter echoed through the hall. They had the audience exactly where they wanted them, comfortable, engaged, waiting for more. The opening minutes of the speech were smooth, well-rehearsed anecdotes about past gala mishaps, light-hearted jokes about the city's ever-worsening traffic. The journalist knew how to work a crowd, how to weave humor and insight seamlessly. But then, the tone shifted. What had begun as general commentary on politics and culture took a sharper turn. The jokes became pointed, directed at well-known figures, their policies, their personal quirks. The laughter in the room was no longer universal. Some guests chuckled heartily, others exchanged uneasy glances. And then, as if it were the most natural progression, The journalist turned their gaze toward a certain table at the back of the room. "Of course," they mused, their voice dripping with feigned innocence. "We can't discuss the future without mentioning the next generation. And what better example than a young man who has grown up in a world of gold-plated everything?" A murmur ran through the audience. People shifted in their seats. Some, recognizing where this was going, inhaled sharply. Others leaned forward, eager to see what would happen next. Barron Trump sat motionless, his expression unreadable. And just like that, the room belonged to him. The journalist smirked, basking in the scattered laughter that followed their words. Their tone remained playful, but beneath it lurked a sharp edge, the kind that turned jokes into barbed insults. Imagine growing up where everything is gold-plated, your home, your elevators, maybe even your toothbrush. A world where reality is so far removed that a Monday morning struggle means deciding which penthouse view to wake up to. A few chuckles rippled through the room, but they were far less certain than before. The journalist, sensing the moment, pushed forward. "And let's be honest, growing up with a Twitter icon for a father must have been character building." Some guests laughed, others grimaced. A noticeable tension hung in the air, stretching like a wire about to snap. All eyes flickered toward Barron, but he remained still. Not a flicker of reaction crossed his face. The silence around his table was deafening. While others shifted uncomfortably, Barron didn't move an inch. His expression remained unreadable, his posture relaxed yet unyielding. His calm was unnerving, unsettling even. The journalist, perhaps expecting a visible flinch, a reaction, anything, continued, but now there was a flicker of uncertainty in their voice. "He's certainly got the look of a future politician, doesn't he? That perfect composure, that absolute stillness, almost like he was sculpted rather than raised." The laughter had dried up. The power in the room had shifted, and for the first time the journalist sensed it. And yet Barron didn't speak. He didn't need to. For a moment, the journalist hesitated, just the briefest pause in their polished delivery. The room felt different now, as though something unspoken had shifted. Barron's silence wasn't passive, it was commanding. There was no avoidance, no shrinking back. His refusal to react wasn't submission, it was defiance in its purest form. The audience, once captivated by the journalist's charisma, was now captivated by Barron's lack of response. The tables had turned, and the journalist was beginning to realize it. A slow, tense moment passed. The journalist cleared their throat, adjusting their stance as if trying to regain control of the moment. "Tough crowd," they muttered into the mic, forcing a chuckle. But the laugh was hollow, and no one echoed it. Barron, still unmoving, finally stirred, not with words, not with an outburst, but with something far more deliberate. He stood. The scrape of his chair against the marble floor was the only sound in the room. A simple movement, yet it carried an unshakable weight. He was tall, his presence amplified by the sheer contrast of his silence against the journalist's words. All eyes were on him now. The journalist, suddenly very aware of the moment, tensed slightly. Barron took a slow step forward, then another. The distance between him and the stage seemed impossibly vast, yet he walked it with an ease that made it feel as though it were the journalist who had been put on trial. And with every step he took, the room held its breath. A hush fell over the room. The moment Barron Trump pushed back his chair and stood, it was as if time itself had paused. The soft scrape of the chair against the polished marble floor echoed louder than any voice had that night. At just over 6 feet tall, he towered over most, but it wasn't his height that commanded attention. It was the sheer force of his presence. There was no anger in his expression, no indignation in his posture. Instead, there was an unshakable calm, a quiet confidence that seemed to reach every corner of the room. Eyes widened, breaths were held, and the journalist, once so self-assured, so in control, shifted ever so slightly behind the podium. Barron did not rush. His steps were slow, deliberate. The crowd, which had moments ago been wrapped in amused anticipation, now sat paralyzed by an entirely different energy. The journalist had used words to capture the room. Barron was doing it with silence. Step by step, he crossed the distance between his table and the stage. The journalist, gripping the edges of the podium, forced a chuckle. "Well, this is unexpected," they quipped, but their voice lacked its usual bravado. Barron reached the edge of the stage and stopped. He met the journalist's gaze, steady, unwavering. He did not blink, did not shift, did not falter. The room was suffocatingly silent. And then he spoke. "Thank you for your insight," Barron said, his voice calm, deliberate, every syllable perfectly measured. The audience was stunned. No lashing out, no return fire, just poise. Barron's gaze never wavered as he continued. "I understand the world we live in," he said, his voice even, steady. "People like to fill in the gaps, to assume they know someone based on headlines, assumptions, and jokes." The journalist swallowed hard. They had faced heated debates before, arguments filled with passion and rage. But this was something else entirely. This was controlled. This was powerful. Barron took a small step closer, his eyes locked onto the journalist's. "But there's something important we forget," he continued, his tone carrying the weight of someone far beyond his years. "Behind every headline, every name, every punchline, there is a person with their own experiences, their own struggles, their own dignity." The crowd, completely still, absorbed every word. This was no longer about a joke. This was something far greater. "I don't expect everyone to like my family. That's not my concern," Barron said, his voice unwavering. "But respect should not have to be earned. It should be given, not because of status, not because of wealth, but because we are all human." The journalist, once the master of the room, now seemed smaller behind the podium. Their usual charm had faded, their wit rendered useless in the face of such grace. Barron turned, addressing the audience now. "Words have power," he stated, his voice carrying through the stunned silence. "They can tear people down or they can lift them up. They can divide or they can unite." He let the words settle before adding, "I think we could all use a little more of the latter." And then, just as calmly as he had approached, Barron turned and walked back to his seat. The applause started as a hesitant clap, then another and another, until the entire ballroom was on its feet, roaring with admiration, not just for what he had said, but for how he had said it. The journalists stood frozen at the podium, their moment long gone. But Barron had just defined his own. For a moment, no one moved. No one spoke. The weight of Barron's words still hung in the air like an unbroken chord, vibrating through the stunned silence of the ballroom. And then, the first clap. A hesitant, almost cautious response, but like a ripple in still water, it spread. Another and another, until the entire room erupted into applause, an ovation so thunderous it drowned out even the sound of the journalist setting their microphone back into its stand. People rose to their feet, clapping not just out of admiration, but out of something deeper, respect. Something undeniable had shifted in that room, something far more profound than a mere exchange of words. The journalist, usually the one commanding attention, now stood awkwardly behind the podium, their confidence visibly shaken. Their smirk was gone, their posture uncertain. For the first time in their career, they seemed to realize that words, when met with dignity instead of outrage, could lose their sting. Barron, back at his table, didn't react to the standing ovation. He didn't soak in the praise or look around for validation. He simply sat composed, as if he had done nothing at all. And in that moment, the truth became clear. He had won not by defeating the journalist, but by showing the world that dignity is not dictated by how others treat you, but by how you choose to respond. Within hours, clips of the moment flooded social media. Short videos, some barely a minute long, captured the intensity of Barron's quiet yet commanding presence. Headlines exploded across news outlets. Barron Trump's poised response silences a crowded ballroom. Respect must be given. Barron Trump's powerful speech sparks debate. The night a young man outclassed a journalist on a public stage. The internet became a battleground of opinions. Some praised Barron for his maturity, calling it a defining moment of grace under pressure. Others debated the journalist's remarks, questioning whether public figures, especially young ones, should ever be fair game for ridicule. And then a statement was issued. The journalist, facing overwhelming scrutiny, released an apology. Comedy and commentary are powerful tools, but they must be wielded responsibly. Last night I crossed a line, and I apologized to Barron Trump for my remarks. But the damage was already done. The conversation had grown beyond them, beyond Barron, beyond politics. It had become something much bigger. Days passed, then weeks. The world moved on to new headlines, new controversies. But for many, the memory of that night remained. It wasn't just about a young man standing up to a journalist. It was about something deeper, a moment of collective reflection on the power of words, on the weight of assumptions, on the strength found in restraint. Discussions unfolded in classrooms, on talk shows, around dinner tables. Parents showed the clip to their children as a lesson in grace under fire. Teachers used it as an example of emotional intelligence, of how true strength isn't in retaliation, but in the ability to rise above. And yet, amidst all of this, Barron himself seemed unaffected by the noise. He returned to his life as if nothing had happened. Those close to him noted that he barely acknowledged the viral sensation he had become. He had spoken his truth, and that was enough. He did not seek validation, nor did he revel in the moment's impact. Perhaps that was the greatest lesson of all. For all the noise and chaos of public life, for all the debates and scandals that flooded the media, Barron Trump had reminded the world of one simple truth. Dignity is a choice. Respect isn't something that needs to be demanded. It should be given freely. Not because of power, not because of wealth, but because behind every name, every headline, and every assumption is a human being. In an era where words were often used as weapons, Barron Trump had chosen to use his as a shield. Not to fight, but to remind everyone, no matter their background, no matter their beliefs, that we always have the power to rise above. As the dust settled, one sentiment echoed louder than the rest. Words can wound, but they can also heal. It's up to each of us to decide how we use them.